Our regrets are stories we tell ourselves. When you constantly worry about your past, you're supporting that belief in your present. We were curious about what would happen if we tried to release those worries and rewrite our stories. So we decided to do an experiment.
What happens if we dedicate time to relieving our regrets? This is a show where we take a moment to reveal the messy bits about ourselves without judgment. It's a show where we can reflect, learn, grow, and maybe even laugh about our actions, attitudes, and behaviors. It's a place where we can speak about our past and learn from it. Join us on the journey.
Welcome to today's episode. Hi, Victoria. How are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you, Shadoe?
I'm pretty good today. It's like a crisp weather day in the city today, like sunny, and it's like cold, but not like hit your face cold. I don't know. Have you been out today for a walk?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I just got back from my daily walk with Christian. I thought it was cold.
I mean, it was cold, but it wasn't like the wind in your face kind of cold. Like if you were bundled, you could kind of make it work.
No, the wind by the lake was kind of cold. Yeah, but I can make it work by the lake. Yeah.
Yeah, I also
winter's coming.
Yeah, definitely. I was also walking without my dog today, and I didn't realize that would take me like less than half the time to do all my errands.
Oh, nice.
Gertie time is real. It really probably doubles any type of errand I try to do, maybe even triples the amount of time it takes. But yeah, today I knocked out like 5 errands in an hour and was like, oh, this is different.
Is that your cause for applause?
Actually, I mean, it's related. Yeah, you know what I'll say for that. I've been trying a lot of new strategies to manage my ADHD. And last night, I noticed that I was getting kind of caught up in the loop of like which errand to do first. I was like, oh, I'll go here and then pick up this and then pick up that. And then I kept going back and forth in my head about which was the best way to do it. So I just like took out a big piece of paper and actually drew a little like treasure map almost.
Oh, fun.
And
this is an interesting strategy. Okay.
Yeah. And then I planned out the errands and like made like, you know, a little tiny map. And then I could stop thinking about it because I was like, okay, you solved it. It's written down. You don't have to keep thinking about it. You can just look at it tomorrow morning. And this strategy of like, write it down so you can stop thinking about it is one of those lessons I have to keep learning.
It's so interesting. I'm curious to hear, did you get that strategy from like an ADHD coach or?
I think, yeah, it's just like related to a lot of the different, like at this point, I'm in so many Facebook groups and following so many newsletters and following so many ADHD coaches on Instagram, plus my regular ADHD coach and I meet pretty regularly. So I don't know exactly where all the strategies come in from. I just like try them out as I think of them.
I love these strategies, even if they're not for viewers, I was gonna say viewers, listeners out there. I love strategies like this. And this is kind of what I preach, right? Like small and slow solutions or simple strategies. Strategies don't have to be meditating for 45 minutes, right? And I've been doing research and teaching about actually writing things down on pen and paper, right? Because the brain doesn't acknowledge it if you type it into a computer or on your phone, if you make notes that way, because it just knows you're pressing buttons. There's been tons of research on this. It's so interesting. Our human brain hasn't evolved to the technology we've created. So I guess my curious question to you is, the other thing that we know is when we write it on pen and paper and we use color or we actually draw pictures, it actually helps to program the brain better than if we just wrote words.
Right.
So I think it's so interesting that you learned that strategy, like make a treasure map, make it fun, because the brain loves to be creative. The brain loves stories. And I guess my question is, once you did that, it shut down for you, like that whole worry spiral or whatever, it actually helps?
It does. Cause then every time I would think about like, oh, actually, maybe I should go to that pharmacy before this pharmacy, I'd be like, no, you already figured it out. Just stop.
Cool.
Yeah. So, and a big part of this is actually through a really good friend of mine. She taught me this like open loop, closed loop system that the brain has. And a lot of times people with ADHD have just like, 20 of these loops just open at any one time.
Oh, so it helps you
anytime you can like
close it.
close a loop, like
Cool.
it just gives you a little bit of relief. It's like taking a tiny little Advil is like, okay, that one's closed. And you can kind of like file it away for a few hours. So that's nice.
That's a really cool strategy. And I think anybody can use it regardless if you have ADHD or not. I think it helps with like the worry cycle or the anxiety cycle, right? And everybody has worry cycles and anxiety cycles, right? Regardless of if you're diagnosed with anxiety or not diagnosed with anxiety. Everybody has worry cycles. What a great tool.
I would give the caveat though, that if you're a bit of a perfectionist, like you have to set a limit for yourself. Like you can only draw the map twice. Like I did a rough draft and then I did a nice draft, and the nice draft was still kind of rough for what I would actually like. But I was like, okay, this was supposed to save you time. This is good enough. Let's move on.
Yeah. So setting the intention, like I'm just going to make this. Yeah. It's not for anybody else to see. It's for me. And it's this is for me, which is actually a hard thing to do too. Which kind of segues into what we're doing, right? It's like we set the intention to have this podcast to say, I'm going to take half an hour a week with my friend Shadoe and actually discuss things that are for me, that are for self-care, that are exploring my brain, that are exploring my worry cycle. And I'm going to experiment with ways to release them and release it with language and with listening, speaking, and interacting with a person that cares about me, right? And doing that, or actually setting the intention to do something that's going to help you, is a really hard first step to do.
Oh yeah.
A really hard first step to do.
Yeah.
So saying to yourself, I'm going to draw a treasure map of what I'm going to do tomorrow. Actually, that's a really hard first step to do, to be like, I'm going to do this activity and it's for me. It's for my inner monologue, for my thoughts, for my self-care, for my relief of tension and relief of the feelings that I'm feeling right now. It's a big first step to do.
Yeah. I think you've really hit on something there, which is like, I'm home alone this week. So I think it was a lot easier. But to actually say to like, to even like my partner, if they were home, like, oh, actually I need an hour to like do this on my own. I think I don't think my partner would have any problem with it, but I think I self-censor. Like I don't even approach it.
Because we are afraid. Well, I can tell you what I would feel. I'd say afraid of being judged, of doing something that's different. And then also afraid of the guilt that you feel that you're not spending time with your partner or family member or whatever it is. And that's a huge first step too, to say like, I'm going to take this hour to do this thing for myself, so that here's the caveat, as you would call it. I never use that word, but you do. So that I can feel better about myself, relieve the whatever it is that I'm feeling, anger, anxiety, whatever, so that I am not spending time with you with a pitcher that's empty. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't pour from a pitcher that's empty.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, how do you train your brain to know, like, if I do this with me, then I can be fully present with you, with the person that I love, or the people that I love, or whatever. Right. That's how you got to make the shift. And that's a hard one too.
Oh yeah. Big time. So on that note, I could go on about this for a long time.
Yeah, so could I, but I hope it gave
do you have a specific cause for applause? Is it actually related to maybe organizing a worry loop for yourself? Like, or do you have a totally different cause?
I have a totally different cause for applause.
Okay.
I guess I could relate it, because I'm a master at trying to relate things, but I got my Christmas tree this week. It's real, it's live, and my apartment smells so good.
Nice.
But here it's got a funny story for you, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
Shadoe hasn't heard this story, everybody. Totally
Great.
Live here. Okay, so we got our Christmas tree last week, and we brought it home, and immediately it dropped like half its needles.
Whoa.
Like, and so then I like ran my hand along one of the stems, and I pulled off all of the needles off of one stem and just had like a handful
Oh
of needles, right?
no.
So I was like, oh man, this isn't gonna last, because I got it early because my seasonal affective disorder is setting in as winter sets in. So I need something to kind of make me feel happy, and having a Christmas tree makes me feel happy. So we got it on like November 27th or something, and usually we wait till like December 2nd to get it.
Sure.
So it wasn't actually that much earlier, but I've never bought a Christmas tree in November before. So I returned my Christmas tree.
Whoa.
Who returns a Christmas tree? Right. So we went into the store, and we didn't actually bring the tree because it was ridiculous. Like, we took it out of the house and it was like bare by the time it was out of the apartment. Like, it was like, just like, the tree was like raining. Like, we'd sit there and
oh
just
my gosh,
like things. So I was like, okay, so this Christmas tree is like clearly dead. We can't save it. So we go back to the store, and we have to talk to the manager and then the owner. We bought it just at a grocery store. And they're like, well, do you have it? And we're like, no. Did you actually want us to return the Christmas tree to you? And I was just laughing. I was like, I know this is ridiculous, and it makes me seem like totally anal. I was like, but I can't have a Christmas tree. Like, if I put decorations on it, all the needles fall off. I was like, I need this. I need a tree that's fresh. That smells good. Like, who returns a Christmas tree? Anyways. My cause for my applause is that I was brave enough to return my Christmas tree. And they did it. They let us return it, and they gave us another tree. So we didn't have to pay. Christian was for sure like, we're just gonna have to pay for another tree. It's fine. Pay for another. I was like, no, we bought this tree. It's a product.
It's true.
And then I have to say, there was a little bit of guilt that I was wasting a tree, but not for what you think, but because there is a Christmas tree shortage this year. Have you heard this?
Yes, I have heard this.
Yeah. So do you know why there's a Christmas tree shortage? This is really interesting.
Okay, tell me.
And then we promise you listeners we'll get to our letting go. Okay, so the Christmas trees that you buy at Christmas are 13 years old.
Okay.
So there's three. One is supply chain issues, which is what's happening all over the world right now. So that's one issue. And a lot of Canadian Christmas trees are actually getting shipped down to the States. So that's one issue, or one reason. But the other reason is the recession was in 2008, which was 13 years ago. And when the recession happened, which is how old the Christmas trees are that we buy, a lot of Christmas tree farms shut down. Or they didn't plant as many trees that year because they couldn't afford to buy as many seedlings as they needed to plant. So this is the after effect of the recession in 2008, because it's 13 years later. Interesting. And then the other reason is climate change. So Christmas trees, pine trees. Pine trees need a certain amount of time in cold temperatures to grow properly. And winters haven't been cold enough for them to fully grow. So their growth has been stunted.
Interesting.
So there aren't enough Christmas trees at the 13-year mark that are large enough to actually cut down and sell. Anyways, that's my research. I thought it was interesting because I was like, a Christmas tree shortage? Why? And I like looking at the big picture sometimes. Like, it's so interesting. Okay, it's an after effect of the recession in 2008. And here we go. Everything is affected by global warming, everybody. And I also made a pact with myself, or a deal with myself, not a deal, but I'm trying to be conscious of not calling it climate change and actually calling it global warming, because do you know why we call it climate change and not global warming?
I have a hunch, but I think you're on a really good track here. So
the language was changed so that it felt safer. So governments changed the language from global warming to climate change, because climate change sounds more positive than global warming, and climate change is way less descriptive. And global warming is very descriptive. You get what's happening. We're warming the globe.
I would actually challenge that just a little bit, because I think global warming, a lot of people would just assume meant warming. And when you say climate change, yes, I do agree that there's like the positive spin, but climate is everything. It's why we're having bigger storms and longer droughts and 100-year floods every couple of years.
But we're having all of those because of global warming.
Yes, we are. But I personally think climate change is a little bit more descriptive, because
I think global warming is, well, I think
global warming is what's happening, but I think you would end up getting into arguments with people who are like, but it's not warmer. There was just a blizzard like yesterday.
Right. That's
so
fair too.
In that way, I actually think climate change is more descriptive. But I do also agree with you that like, I think the way we communicate these things definitely impact how serious people take them.
Yeah, to me, the way my brain works is global warming is scarier, so I take it more seriously. But listeners, let us know. We'll put a post up on our Instagram feed, and you can comment on it and tell us. We've got a lot of contentious things that are up on the Instagram feed. We've got the boob discussion. The boob discussion, and now we're going to put up the climate change. So we really want to know what you guys think. Let's see. This wasn't planned at all either. This is how our discussions go. But I'm curious to know what you guys think. Climate change versus global warming. Which language seems more effective to you?
I also had a couple things to mention about the Christmas tree stuff, if you were at all interested. Okay. I was just driving around in a new area of Ontario I haven't been in ever before. And we drove by 2 Christmas tree farms and both of them were closed. So I'm assuming that this means in 2034, we'll also see a Christmas tree shortage.
So they were closed, like shut down, like they were
shut down, like for COVID and like for other reasons, just saying like,
so
nope,
there's
going to
be a COVID Christmas tree shortage, the way there's a Christmas tree shortage from the 2008 recession.
And something else I've noticed, at least in downtown, is all the grocery stores also have like mini Christmas trees now. They have like the 7 foots, and then they have like these cute little 3-foot ones that I've bought in year over year. And I'm wondering if it's like kind of what you're talking about, where it's like, oh, some of them aren't growing as well, but you still have to cut them down at the 13-year mark. And then some other genius was like, ooh, it's a mini Christmas tree. People love mini stuff.
Interesting.
And I do. Especially living in a condo, I do love mini stuff. So just a really good little report on the Christmas tree shortage, and I appreciate that as the cause for applause.
Oh man.
Do you have anything to add before we get into our reveal today?
Well, just make my cause for applause happy. I'm very happy to walk into my living room every morning and to smell the beautiful balsam fir tree that is my Christmas tree. So yay, that's my cause for applause after all
that's
that.
Great. Yeah. Wonderful.
Oh,
okay, great.
I can't wait to hear the hate mail about why I should have a fake tree and not a real tree.
No, I don't think I think that will, again, that's a whole sub report.
We'll see what you guys say on our
Please
interact with us, everybody. Post comments on our Instagram feed. Let us know. We love knowing what you guys think about these conversations that we have. So please interact with us out there, everyone listening. All right. Are you ready?
So I'm ready. Are you ready?
Yeah, I think it's my turn.
I think, it's your turn to go first for sure.
Okay.
Is there anything you want to do to set the stage before you start reading your letter?
Okay. So I can't even remember if I've told everybody this that listens on the podcast, but I'm sure I have. Many of you have gone to my website already, myrecreo.health, and you can read my full story there. But part of my story is I had a total mental breakdown in 2014 because of my work. And I was overworked. I was working in the public sector. And then I ultimately ended up filing a complaint and then getting bullied and harassed at work because of the complaint. And then what happened is as part of my breakdown, like the day of my breakdown, my body was paralyzed because I just was so stressed out and had so much cortisol in my body. Like that was it. I shut down. But then I spent like a good 2, 3, 4 years healing myself. I had to leave that job healing myself. And I'm now a person that lives with anxiety and a person that lives with seasonal affective disorder. And ironically, I was talking to my psychiatrist yesterday, and I think I've held on to this false hope that I'll be able to 100% get off of my anxiety meds at some point, or that the anxiety will go away. And, you know, my psychiatrist, like, there's a strong possibility, and this happens, and it's okay, that once people are traumatized from whatever it is they're traumatized, you're just going to be a person living with anxiety and managing it. And I might have this illness, disease, whatever you want to call it, for the rest of my life. And so I have to come to terms with that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, but anyways, on that like 4-year journey, when I was like managing this complaint and trying to change the system of where I used to work to make it better for other workers, because there was a lot of reasons why I had the breakdown and I wasn't treated fairly. I became really, really paranoid, and I didn't trust anybody that worked for the same organization that I worked. And I also like got some bad legal advice to like never talk to anybody ever again. But I worked there for 15, 16 years. And it was social work, it was casework, it was recreation work. And when you're in that kind of work, the people you work with become your friends, because you're dealing with, you know, I was dealing with a lot of newcomers to the country. I was dealing with children that were living under the poverty line. Like, you lean on your coworkers. So that's what I'm going to say before I read my story.
Okay. I think that's going to be really, like, maybe not completely relatable to everyone in your exact situation, but just the feeling of overwhelm at work is never a good one.
Yeah. And the feeling of paranoia, though, is really the thing that I look back now and I'm like, I wish I'd managed the paranoia more. Because the paranoia and the way I shut myself off from everybody because I didn't trust them, isolated me even more.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Wonderful.
I have something that I want to let go of in order to move forward. Here it is. Many of you know that I went through a time in my life where I was working way too much and bullied in the workplace, and I started to be taken advantage of. And during that time, I developed anxiety, panic, depression, and I really struggled. But what I want to talk about today is the deep paranoia that developed. And I have to be honest, this is actually the first time I've talked about it outside of my head. I haven't talked about the paranoia with my husband. I haven't really acknowledged that paranoia is what happened, even with my therapist. So I want to admit and acknowledge the deep paranoia that I developed. So I was so afraid of being judged, and that I was a failure, and that I was weak. And because of that, I started to believe that everyone at my workplace was against me, that they had ulterior motives. And I have to say that in the workplace atmosphere I was in, a lot of people were. So not all of my paranoia was false. A lot of it was actually true. People were keeping tabs on me. People were watching me. People were reporting my moves to other people because I was involved in a legal case against them, because I wanted them to change the way the workplace worked, the way that I was treated, and the way young workers were treated, because young workers were taken advantage of. And this is happening all over the place, being put on contract jobs, getting paid less for more work, not getting benefits, not getting supports, not all of these things, not getting proper vacation, all of these things, right? That's what I was fighting against. So before I get into my regret about the paranoia, I also have to acknowledge that some of the paranoia was true, and it wasn't paranoia. It was me observing, because I'm a good observer, and noticing what was going on around me and how I was being treated. So I was paranoid at one point. I can't believe I'm about to admit this. And again, it could be true. I don't know. But I was paranoid at one point that my employer was following me, that there was like a private eye following me or something. So that's one thing that happened with the paranoia. And another thing is, because the paranoia became so big, and as the case became bigger, actually, I got really, really, really angry because I felt helpless. I was being bullied by management. The system was bullying me. I felt alone. I felt like no one had my back. I felt like no one cared about me as a person. And I think this happens to a lot of people in workplaces. You feel like you're not being treated as a human, you're being treated as an employee number, right? So I felt like I put all this work, and especially in the work that I was doing, was I was dealing in humans. I was working with human beings and helping human beings feel less isolated. I was doing casework. I was working with children. I was training staff on how to teach children how to have fun through physical activity. Like I was doing all these things that were in my department, was about seeing humans as humans, seeing people as people, seeing the person. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't being seen as a person. So I was so lost and my emotions were all over the place. So there's a few things that I regret from that time period. There's a few things that I'm really proud of from that time period. And I think I talk a lot about what I'm proud of more than I talk about the things I regret. And these things keep me up at night sometimes. So I need to let them go. So the first thing is that even though I was getting help and seeing a therapist, I still held back. I still had a wall around me because I was still super afraid of being judged. And I was even afraid of my therapist judging me. So I didn't let things go or talk about things probably for a good 2 years. And today's a prime example. I just told you I haven't never talked about the paranoia. I didn't allow myself to feel safe, but all I was doing a disservice to myself because my therapist is there to help me and they don't tell anybody anything. So I didn't release my feelings. I held on to them until they became discharged in uncontrollable ways. And what do I mean by discharge? There's a difference between discharging and releasing. Discharging is when you hold in your anger or you hold in whatever it is and it comes out and you can't control it. So you yell at the cashier at the grocery store or you yell at a friend. And that's what was happening. I just became a really angry person and I was discharging instead of releasing, which is really what this podcast is all about, right? We release these things so that they don't build up inside us. The second thing that I regret is I had 2 mentors in my job. And one mentor had mentored me through years and years of, I had a love of teaching children physical activity and a love of promoting movement in different ways and getting people active. And she had mentored me for many years and we'd worked together for many years. And another one I only worked with for a couple of years, also worked in the active living department with me, but really was really there for me, like let me into her life and was really there for me and would send me texts and, really did treat me as a person. But because both of these mentors were management and I had bad legal advice that said, don't talk to anybody from management. And because of my paranoia, I stopped talking to them because I was afraid that they would use anything I told them against me, that they would report anything that I told them to upper management. I believed that they wouldn't have my back and that they didn't care about me as a person. And that comes from that fear of judgment. And this is part of the disease of anxiety and depression. You isolate yourself so much, you believe nobody cares about you as a person, right? And these women had been in my life for over 10 years and they'd helped me grow as a leader, as a person, and they had my back. And they taught me so much about what really fueled my passion for wellness advocacy and helping people be the healthiest version of themselves that they can be. And I cut them off. And I really regret that. I'm not going to say their names, but they know who they are based on the description that I just gave of both of them. And if you're listening, I really regret it. And the consequence of me holding on to this belief that they were part of the system or this paranoia was that I isolated myself from support then and from support now as I'm building my own business that is in the wellness industry, in the health industry. I'm still afraid that they're angry at me for cutting them off. So I'm afraid to reach out to them because I'm afraid of rejection. But really, I'm missing out on living a life without self-judgment and usually when we feel the way that somebody's going to reject us, it's usually our own paranoia. Usually when we actually reach out to them, they're happy to hear from us. And that's a step that I need to take. So I'm going to acknowledge that I did everything that I could in that period of time in my life with the tools that I had at that time. And it's okay. I was suffering deeply. I was struggling deeply. And I didn't understand the mental illness that I had developed. And I didn't have the tools then that I have now. And I didn't have the self-awareness that I have now after years of therapy and personal growth work. I didn't have those tools then. And that's okay. That was who I was then. And I've learned so much about being a person that lives with anxiety and that functions with anxiety since then. And I've become more self-aware and more in tune with what I need to do to heal every day and what I need to prioritize in my life, which is love, happiness, and freedom. I'm worthy of their forgiveness. So I'm releasing the shame I feel about the person I was during one of the most difficult times in my life. And that's my story.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I have lots to say, but I also just want to check in with you. Like, how are you feeling after sharing that?
It's good. Like, I need to, part of the process and part of the reason of doing this podcast in real life is I'm good at sharing, but I need to be better at sharing because I know that the feelings that I feel and the things that I felt in the past or the feelings I still feel now make me human. But I also know there's so many people out there struggling in exactly the same ways I did that need to hear that other people have the exact same fears and the exact same feelings. So that you know that it's okay and it's normal and we need to provide support. So if just one woman out there listening can relate to what I said, I feel good about that. And to know that you can come out on the other side and there's support for you, right? So it's like my mission in life now. So I feel pretty good. I'm still feeling a little, I feel good. I'll just say that.
Okay. Do you feel good enough for feedback or were you hoping to just be heard today?
Yeah, I'd love feedback.
Okay, great. So a lot of what you were sharing, I actually have a bit of the opposite experience, so I can't wait to share my letter. But the feedback, maybe this is kind of a silly question and maybe it's wrong to ask in such, deep sharing mode. But to me, it sounded like you were living in the Truman Show. Did you ever feel that way?
Oh, yeah. But the Truman Show was like everybody was for him, like they were creating a life around him. Mine was like everybody was against me.
Right.
So kind of like the Truman Show, but like the opposite of the Truman. You know what I mean? Like everybody wanted Truman to succeed.
Right.
Kind of at the beginning at the end of the movie. But for me, it was like I felt like everybody wanted me to fail.
Oh, man. And was that happening even when you weren't at work, or was it like,
oh yeah,
I know you said you were talking about, you thought you were being followed, were strangers kind of getting that same lens placed on them?
No, I thought I was being followed outside of work. And then I left work. Like I went on like a leave, like a medical leave. And I was like afraid to talk about things in public in a coffee shop about my court case or whatever, because I was like, that person over there looks like they may be recording me with their phone, like whatever, right? Yeah. But that paranoia stems from people talking about that in the workplace. Right. People would talk about it in the workplace about other people that had filed like complaints that became like legal complaints. And they'd be like, oh yeah, they'll follow you. They'll like all the rumor mill, right? So I didn't make it up in my head that like, oh, someone's following me. People would say that, sure, if you think someone's following you, they probably are.
Right. Right.
Paranoia breeds more paranoia, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting you talk about being observant. And I always worry about like being observant and finding that right balance, because I can also create a bit of a narrative around other people without checking in about their actual motives. So yeah, I just, is there anything that, like, if you could go back to yourself in 2014, like, let's say you now had a time machine and you were walking down your favorite street, and this person stops you and says, I'm you from 2021 and I have this to tell you, what would you tell 2014 Victoria?
Hmm.
And would 2014 Victoria even trust you?
Well, probably not.
Right.
But I think the biggest one was really my two mentors, just to say, they actually do care about you as a person. Like when I look back now, I'm like, they cared about me as a person, not as an employee. And it would have been okay to continue to have contact with them.
Right.
And that might have given me some support.
Maybe.
Yeah. And I some of it was advice from like the people that were representing me. They were like, don't talk to anybody. Like I mean, if people are your friends, right. It's a complicated line, but for me, these two women in particular, they had my back.
Right. I'm also curious as to, like, what was the health of your outside support system, like your non-work support system at the time?
So part of my issue is that when I, at the time, I'm like so much better at it now. But my issue then was my anxiety was so bad. I wouldn't pick up the phone. I wouldn't answer texts. My anxiety was so bad. I just thought everybody was out to get me, even though they weren't, or I just didn't have the energy. I was like, I just don't have the energy to talk to people. But I have to say, during that time, it's always interesting to look back and see who pushed support on me. I mean it in a good way, and who abandoned me, because I was a difficult person. It's a hard thing to help someone through. And the people that are my friends now are the people that came out of the woodwork then.
Right.
And I really figured out who's there for me. I had one friend that would just hold me accountable all the time. I texted you 3 days ago. You haven't texted me back.
Right.
What's going on? Just text me back. I'm not going to be angry at you. Just text me back. And then I had, another friend that, oh, I haven't heard from you in 2 weeks. Whenever I don't hear from you from 2 weeks, that means that you're not feeling well. So just checking in. Like, people really took the time to understand what anxiety is and what it was for me, because it's different for each individual. Certain friends were like, what is it for you? What does it feel like for you?
Right.
What do you need from me? What are your fears? And still to this day, they're super great. Like, if they and it's, almost 10 years later, right? Those are people that are still my friends, but I had to learn how to let them in.
Right.
And Christian was amazing through the whole thing. Like, I can't even explain. I wouldn't have survived without him. Christian was unbelievable throughout the whole thing. So, and still is. So.
Aw, you guys are so cute. I love it.
But I really had to learn. I really had to learn what friendships were right relationships for me and what ones were not. And I learned quite quickly. Yeah.
Also, do you think you talked a little bit about holding back at the therapist's office? Do you think the therapist was able to pick up on that you were holding back?
Oh, I'm sure. I once I had to get my therapist notes for the so that I could redact things because we were giving them as evidence. And I was like, oh, so this is what they write down.
Right.
I just, they're writing the whole time. I'm like, just think they're writing what I'm saying. Oh no, it's like, Victoria looked disheveled today.
Right.
Like, oh, so okay. They really know what they're doing, right? Like, therapists really know what they're doing. Like, she looks tired today, or writing down what they observed too. So yeah, I'm sure. And I'm really lucky that I found a therapist that had the patience, still has the patience, Yeah.
Yeah. And also, this other question is probably my last one. Not probably. This one is my last one. How important is it to have a support system to release upon so that you're not discharging to every other person out there?
Okay. So here's one of the skills that I've learned, which I've really only started doing this like maybe 2 years ago. And
Okay.
again, this is kind of where the idea for this podcast came from, is like doing releasing on a regular basis. So a couple of my friends and friends that became really close with me during that time period that are still, they're like my best friends now. We usually do it on the solstice or the equinox, but somewhere around the beginning of each season, we meet and we just make it up. Like we do our own like letting go ceremony. We just make it up, but it's now like tradition. So, and we invite other people, they want to come, but we go down to the beach by my house and we will write down all the things we want to release, tell each other what they are. And we'll do something like we'll burn the piece of paper or we'll rip it up and bury it or whatever. But we kind of like we sit in a circle, and sometimes we dress up. Sometimes I'll just dress up crazy, or sometimes we don't, or whatever. If it's warm enough, like for spring, summer, and fall, we run into the water, like, do a run into the water and like, just, but it's not like we don't like candles or anything, but it's just like, we just talk to each other and we're like, this is the intention of this meeting of friends today. And we're going to release and do this like ceremony, and we do it 4 times a year, or ritual, or whatever you want to call it. Right. And, one of my friends came, for the fall one. She'd never done it with us. She's like, this is amazing. And we like ran into the water, and the water was kind of cold, and it was great. Sometimes we like scream things into the wind. Like we just kind of do, we're like if you have an idea of some way you want to like release or let go, like we do it, and we do it together.
Fun.
And then after we've released, we do what we call calling it in. So then we just scream into the wind, like what we're calling in. So like we've released things. We're like, now I'm calling in more money. Now I'm calling in more health. No, whatever. Like, and then we call in what we want. And what was your question? Because I know this is answering the question.
Oh, no, it is. So like you have this regular ritual for releasing, and do you find that's enough to resist discharging onto like
the discharging thing,
customer service reps or whatever else?
Yeah. So that actually helps, but I realized that I needed to do it more often, and that's why where this came, like this podcast came upon of me and you, like we have a weekly ability to just have a release discussion and discuss.
Right.
So there's the big things that I do maybe 4 times a year, but I think it's important to have like a letting go ritual or routine that can be as simple as having a conversation with a friend once a week, which is really what you and I are doing, like a conversation with intention. But the other thing that's been really powerful with my friendships is if I do discharge, they immediately, and I do the same for them, relieve the guilt.
Right. Nice.
Like they immediately are like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah.
Why did you just do that? Let's talk about what's really going on. And that's a really beautiful thing to have, versus she yelled at me, and then you get into the whole drama, and then the drama, and you have to say sorry, and all these things are like, okay, you needed to do that. That's cool. What's up?
Right.
But we've been able, you have to have these real conversations to be like, okay, this is how I'm dealing with my anxiety. This is how I'm dealing with this. Right. And so if we do really, if I end up discharging, it's usually on one of them or Chris or my husband.
Good.
And because it's safe now, they're like, I'm not going to get mad at you for that, but what just happened?
Right. Nice.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's have a glass of wine and talk about that. Right. So, but it takes work to build those relationships, and you have to say what your needs and wants are. And you have to say, like, you have to do things with intention. Right. And that's a lot of deep work, but I'm lucky that I've had a lot of friends that have done a lot of deep work too, and done work with me and work on themselves. And now I don't discharge as much. It's very rare for me to discharge, actually.
Right. I also like if you see someone, okay, I know I said that was no, okay, it was only probably my last question. Okay, this one's the real one. This one's the real last question. What about when you see this behavior from strangers in public? Like, do you try to get involved? Do you try to walk away? What, like, I don't know. Like,
okay, this is going to sound really weird, but this is like a hard line.
Okay.
So this is like a hard line for me. It's very rare that I get involved.
Okay.
For 2 reasons. I have to protect myself. So I'll walk away, because that's like a lot of energy that I don't need, because I have to be really aware of my energy. And then there's the business perspective. I'm a life coach. I'm a mindset coach. I work with people one-on-one. I deserve to be paid to help people. I know this sounds really weird. But I think it's important for women to hear other women say this, and other small business owners say this. I have limited energy, and I can't spend the energy on someone that's discharging there unless it's a really simple thing that I can just say, hey, are you okay? But I deserve to be paid for that energy when it happens. And it's not just that I deserve to be paid. I want to help people long term. I want to help person over a period of 6 months, a year, 3 years, whatever it is. And I'd rather put that energy into the clients that are coming to me that are saying, I need your help. I'm ready to help me figure out how to let go and release, than put it into a stranger on the street that might tell me to F off.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
That might be a weird answer, but I hope it
No, I love it. I have a real problem with this boundary. It's very porous on both sides. So it's interesting that you would bring up this this hard line. It's a hard line. I respect it for it. I really respect it. Yeah.
I really had to learn how to be confident with that hard line. So quite a few of my friends are also small business owners, and like to have that confidence again as a woman, because men are fine drawing the hard line. You know, when I first started, I was like years and years ago, I was always a personal trainer on the side, regardless of what my full-time job was. I always had some personal training clients, but the worst is when you're at a party and people are like, oh, you're a personal trainer. Can I ask you about this muscle and this stretch and whatever?
Right.
And you're basically like giving them a free training session at a party. Like you have to be like, I'll like answer one thing for them and be like, you know, if you're interested, give me a call and book a session. Like people, you know, like to acknowledge that people are valuable for what they can give. And if it is their business, you have to value that it's their business.
That's tough too, though, because like a lot of like the most basic networking tips are like ask questions, ask follow-up questions. So like, how do you know if someone's trying to like get to know you versus someone's trying to exploit your free expertise?
Well, they're the person that's selling is trying to exploit. Right. I'd be the person that's selling.
No, but you're not selling. I'm just saying, like, if you're at a party and like someone starts asking you all these questions, like,
it doesn't matter. Networking. I don't think that anybody's intentionally trying to exploit. I don't think anybody intentionally does that, but I think it's a skill that we have to learn. If someone does this professionally, and I find myself doing it too. Oh, you're a doctor? What do you think about this?
Right.
Like, don't ask, don't ask personal questions of, you know, people they're not at work. I know that's probably controversial. Again, guys, if you want to comment on this out there, I know, but I think it's important skill to learn as a small business owner or female business owner is how much do you give away for free?
I mean, I think entertainers fall into that all the time too. You go to a party and someone's like, what? You're a comedian? Tell me a joke.
Yeah.
It's like, give me $50.
A perfect example. It's a perfect example.
Yeah. I actually just the other night watched the episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where like he runs into a therapist just like he's at like the baseball Hall of Fame or something, and he runs into his therapist and starts like asking him questions, and then later in the episode he gets an invoice and he's just outraged that like how dare he get an invoice for that wasn't an appointment,
right?
But I love that show. It's so great.
It's a good discussion to have, right? And what are your boundaries and what are your hard lines? And I can't be on all the time. I have to look after my own personal health. I can't be giving energy to other people all the time. I have to give energy to myself too. And I learned that the hard way, everybody. All right. Would you like to share?
I would like to share because I am definitely on the other side of this this discussion, actually.
Okay, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I regret confiding personal issues to coworkers. I have an experience I need to let go of to move forward. I regret confiding personal issues to my coworkers. I thought this made me more approachable and would explain some of my emotional outbursts in the office. I had no filter and would bring my whole self to work each day with all my baggage open for anyone who would listen. it didn't occur to me that their families also had drama and they were simply keeping quiet. I assumed they were fascinated by my true yet outlandish stories. The consequences at the time was that I seemed unreliable and I became a magnet for other workplace issues, like if someone wanted to gossip about their superior. This would come back to hurt my career options more than once. The consequence now is that due to holding on to this regret, I fear returning to the workplace. I've been trying, but not as hard as I can. Part of that has been working through a mental health diagnosis and seeking ways to make my own money that doesn't bring me back to that environment. So I did everything that I could in the moment with the tools that I had at the time, and that is okay. That is who I was then, and I have grown in so many ways. I am hopeful and relieved because I am now more capable of compartmentalization and I'm worthy of earning money.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Would you like feedback or do you just want to be heard?
Sure. Feedback's good. I also realized there's a couple of mysteries in that one that we could unpack a little.
Yeah. So the first thing you said is that you think it's the opposite of kind of what I was going through?
I think so. I've never really heard of this term of discharge until we started recording this episode, but I was basically doing that every single day. Like anyone, like it did not matter. Like I would show up at someone's cubicle and be like, guess what my dad did last night? And I would just go off on this really deeply, probably to them, emotional story that they weren't equipped to take on. And I just didn't care. Because if they were showing me that they were listening, I was like, oh, they find me fascinating. Let me entertain them for the next 20 minutes. And so I was very porous in that way. And also so that would come back to bite me because everyone kind of knew that I was this magnet of drama. And then a couple of other times I thought I had confided something to someone one-on-one. And then I was in a meeting and somebody else made a joke about it. And I was like, oh, I thought those but I get what happened. People gossiped about me because I was a gossip. It was just it was kind of part of this thing. So even though I had never, ever talked to the person who made the joke, clearly, and that person was a superior of my superior.
Oh, interesting.
So it was okay, so even though I confided something into my superior that I thought was just my regular day of here's the Shadoe show, I'm a one-woman show, listen to all my stories, and I also would try to use it to excuse bad work. I would do it to excuse my lateness. I was
how would you use it to excuse bad work?
Oh, if I didn't hand in good work that week, I'd be like, oh my God, but all this stuff's happening at home. And I would just start crying and divulging so many personal details that I looking back, I'm sure they were just okay, get out of here. I don't want to talk to you about this anymore. But they had to kind of put on this attitude of caring. And not that I don't think anyone did it fakely or anything. I feel bad. I feel bad for forcing people to take on my emotional baggage without asking for consent first. I just didn't even realize, again, I thought I was doing everyone a favor. I thought I was giving everyone this really entertaining way of living at work, because I make work more fun. And then because I'm also I'm doing it right now, I would just rant and rave, and then someone else would come to my desk and be like, I need to go for a walk, and I'd be like, awesome, and then we would go for a walk and talk.
I love this energy of gossip,
right?
Yeah. So okay, so I think I understand this now when you say it's kind of the opposite of what I was feeling. So for me, if I discharged, I would immediately feel guilty about it. But for you, when you were discharging, you were like, I did them a favor because I made them laugh, and this is a Shadoe show.
Totally.
Did you ever feel guilty about it? Or did you feel guilty about it years later as you're reflecting back on it now?
Even now that I know it was wrong, I still don't feel guilty about it. Like they could have told me to F off. They could have told me to be quiet. The only time I ever even, and again, I didn't even feel guilty when I heard the superior of my superior tell that joke. I just felt a little bit betrayed because I thought I had told my superior this kind of thing in confidence.
Yeah.
And then I was at a briefing and made a comment, and then the comment kind of came back to bite me, and I was like, oh shit, like clearly those two have talked, and like my reputation precedes me now because of that. So yeah, and it's not that like it's not that my superior was not discreet, like she was. It was just, I'm sure it just kind of came up.
It's really hard to be discreet in workplaces when you're so open about things, especially in cubicle atmospheres. I don't know if you're in a cubicle atmosphere or not.
Yes, I was.
Yeah, I find that it kind of breeds this culture of it's okay to gossip and it's okay to just share everything, and everybody feels entitled to talk about everybody else.
Yeah. And
I don't know the reason. I'm sure there's some psychological study on it and whatever on cubicle atmospheres, but so can I make a comment about, some of that's good though. Like, I think it's interesting that you don't feel guilty about it, that you're like, well, they could have told me to F off, but they didn't.
Right. Yeah.
I actually think that's a little healthy that you're not taking on all the guilt of that. So I think that's interesting because it's true, right? We are responsible for our own energy. I'm responsible for my energy. I'm responsible for that. If I all of a sudden am in a conversation that is draining me or that I'm feeling heavy, I am totally allowed to say to you or the other person to say, I'm starting to feel a little drained from this conversation. Can we come back to it later? Or like, you're totally allowed, but that skill is hard.
Oh yeah.
But when you learn the skill, people will actually respect you more. The person on the other end of hearing that, you're teaching them that they can do it too, right? It's about leading by example. I have a friend that will sometimes say, okay, well, I'm full of this topic. Can we let's,
that's a great approach.
What are graceful ways you can say it? But when you learn the skill, it's like, or sometimes, and again, I have, that will tell them, forgive me if I've discharged or whatever, like we talked about, but sometimes to just say, I don't have any energy today for that. Or on the end that you are at, I've learned to do with people, which we're leading by example in this podcast. I don't know if you've noticed, listeners, we always say, do you want feedback or do you want to just be heard? That's a good skill to actually be frank and precise about asking a person their needs. You can do that at the beginning of a conversation too. Like I have a couple of my friends, we do the like, hey, do you have the energy to talk about this with me right now? Because I really need to talk to somebody about this. It's okay if you don't have the energy to do it right now. Like either through a text before I phone them or whatever, because it's harder to say no to someone's face, but we all do it in kind of my group of friends. Like, do you have the energy to talk about this right now? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to call you in 2 minutes. Is that cool? Right. But and it's not always like that. I mean, I'm saying my friendships are organic and stuff too, but if it's something that you really need support on, you need to make sure the other person is able to give you the support.
Totally.
Because if they're not able to give you the support, you're going to get angry at them because you think you've assumed that they can give you the support, but maybe they can't. But again, sorry, I was starting with the good thing. The good thing is that you've put the onus in your mind, even when you look back on it, you've put the onus on them, which is, it's so interesting. I love the way your brain works. Like, instead of the guilt, you're like,
it's like one of the only, like, I feel guilty about a lot of stuff all the time. And again, it's just, I think other people too were doing it. I don't think I was the only person just launching into emotional baggage all the time. And I think for some people, I feel like some people kind of take that as a clue that they can also do that. Right. And then but then
if somebody else is doing it to you, why can't you discharge on someone? Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So like, I definitely had a couple cubicle mates I definitely quid pro quo for sure. I had that, but then I definitely there's one person in particular that I do feel a little bit bad for, because she was a bit of an introvert and she sat across the cubicle from me, and I was having specific problems with my parents when I worked with her, and at one point she ended up getting her cubicle moved. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, you still work here, but you moved your cubicle. And I didn't really think anything about like what I was doing to her. And then like a few weeks later, she had to temporarily go back to her old cubicle, which was again beside me. And I started talking to her and she was like, you know what, Shadoe, like your parents stress me out more than my own parents do. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. And I never shared stuff with her again, because like she let me know that like, oh, actually I am not interested.
It's a really brave
And
thing to
it
do.
was really brave, especially like I'm such a loud expressive person, so like I could see that it would have taken her a lot of courage to actually say that to me, and I think even in the moment I was like, well, if they stress you out, think about how I feel. And she was like, I do think about how you feel all the time. And she didn't say, and it's too much, but I could tell that behind her eyes she was like, I'm done, like I can't just be your therapist here. Interestingly enough, I talk about in this letter of like returning to an office and worrying about returning to that kind of behavior. And I did take on a new job recently. It's seasonal. And in my first week, I had 2 different family emergencies happen. And sure enough, I just would unload about them to whoever was closest to me. And it wasn't until my next meeting with my ADHD coach that I was like, oh, hey, I'm noticing that I'm doing this behavior. And we came up with a couple of coping mechanisms, interestingly enough, writing it down. We've come full circle, writing it down, and keeping like a parking lot digest kind of at my desk. So similarly, like I have a notebook that's for my notes because I'm learning on the job. But at the back of the book, I have a separate section that's for like, I'm really upset about XYZ. And I write it down instead of just like telling my coworkers, because like my coworkers have enough going on. I just assumed that if people weren't sharing what was going on in their lives, they didn't have anything going on in their lives.
Oh, interesting.
And like by having access to like my stories, they could live vicariously through me. So I had this really like first person like narrative about my life. And now that I am in a new office and finding time to actually like write things down, or when I am getting frustrated, I text a friend instead of like telling a coworker right away. That said, if I've written down the same thing 6 times, I am gonna like actually write an email and try to word it nicely and flag it, because I am just a natural advocate. And my coach was like, that's really great. A lot of people are really attracted to that openness and vulnerability, but a lot of people are turned off by it. And it can be a real wedge in the workforce. And not to like, quiet me down or whatever, but just to find the places to pick my moments. And it's interesting because impulsively, I want to talk all the time, but to actually sit down and like, I'll just say it, I'm upset about the condition of the chairs in our workplace. And I would say 4 or 5 years ago, if that was what was going on, I'd be like talking about it. I would be loudly complaining about it. I'd be moving all the chairs around. I'd be talking about this and that to everyone. And now I just kind of like get up every hour and walk around the floor. And then when I sit back down, it's fine. And it's just about finding these other ways to like move energy throughout your body and mind. Again, it's so different. So maybe I'm not completely against going back to the office. I just have to have like more strategies in place to like thrive in that kind of environment.
I want to thank you so much for sharing what you just shared, or everything that you've demonstrated today from the beginning of our like conversation.
Right.
The idea of having coping strategies that work for you.
Yeah.
And I think when you're in it, when you're in a place of depression or anxiety, to search out the people that can help you with realistic strategies that work for you. And a lot of the times it has to be a professional or an online personal growth course run by a professional or whatever it is, because people might not know what to tell you. Right. And what do people usually tell you? Take a breath, go for a walk, just let it go. Right. But you have demonstrated really specific strategies that you've developed for yourself that work. And this is like my mission in life too, is to share really specific strategies. I think we've both done that today, but I want to thank you so much for being really open and honest about it, because this is life. There should be no fear around trying a strategy where you're coloring something like a kid or knowing that you need to journal every day or whatever it is, because don't you want to live your best life? Don't you want to live with freedom? Don't you want to live with the ability to know that you are creating energy for yourself and others that is of service, is selfish for you because you're allowed to be selfish, all those things, but try the strategies, try all these things. And I just love that you've demonstrated today simple ones, because I'm all about like easily and naturally done or small and slow solutions. You guys have heard me say both of those things all the time by this point, I'm sure. Like, you have another book that you keep and then that you write things in. And it's also about self-awareness. What does that big term mean? Self-awareness.
Right.
You just demonstrated it perfectly, Shadoe. I have a book I keep at work. I am aware that this is the effect that I have on people sometimes. Right. But I just want to also give you some love, because I think it's important that some people love that energy, and I love that energy. So just to know that, like, to know your boundaries, to know again, self-awareness of how you have with people, and to surround yourself with the people that want to be around that type of energy so you can feel good about yourself. Like, you're a magnificent person. Like, you've just demonstrated really so much stuff today. Just like what you've told.
Yeah. I think it's just too, like, it is a self-awareness thing. And like, and like you're saying, like, that energy can be really appreciated. But it wasn't just that, it's that before it was like a tap, and the tap was just running all day long.
And now a great analogy.
Like, and now it's like I kind of turn it off, and sometimes it's a little bit of a dribble, and then when I can turn it back on, I'll bring it back full force to the people who want it. And then for the people who don't like it or haven't shown me that they like it yet, maybe is the best way to kind of put that. I slowly release it. I'm slowly like making a joke here or there, or, like being like, oh no, this happened in the kitchen. And like, if it, and if people don't laugh at my joke, then I'm like, oh, okay, well, this isn't really the place for those jokes, or things like that. Or I also don't take it personally, because everyone in my new workplace is new. Like, we're all part of a brand new team. We're figuring it out as we go. There is some stuff that's frustrating. And I'm kind of letting other people loudly bemoan how frustrating this stuff is. And then I'm taking a moment to be like, oh, well, people are different. Everyone's different.
Well, I think when you loudly bemoan, you get into the spiral of anger, anxiety, which is what my story kind of told us. Like, I just started focusing on all the negative things, and I should have. They were really bad negative things, everybody. They weren't just like, but okay, so I have one last question.
Okay, great.
Because I think it's important. I think people can learn from you. Do you think that since you've developed these strategies or this ability to be self-aware, like, oh, this person doesn't vibe with me, or however you want to put it. Okay, so before you did this, on a scale of 1 to 10, did you care what people thought of you?
Oh, all the time.
So, and now on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you worry or care about what people think of you?
It's tough to gauge, because I think it is.
Has it changed? I guess
it's changed. It's more individualized. Like, there's certain people I want to like me, and certain people I don't care about. And also it's more about, again, when we talk about energy transference, I don't want to give any of my negative energy to someone who isn't equipped to handle it, because that's not fair. It's just not fair to be like, here's a pile of bricks. So you don't like that pile of bricks? I'm so sorry, but like, not sorry at all.
Take them, take the load.
Yeah.
In the past, when you gave an unsuspecting person your energy, and they didn't seem like they didn't like you anymore or whatever, did that give you a lot of like self-doubt? Nobody likes me, everybody hates me, going to the garden to eat worms kind of thing? Like, how much did you care?
I kind of had like personal vendettas against those people.
Okay. And
now that's
now
more what it was.
And now
I just realized that, like, that relationship isn't at the same level of depth as like the other relationships in my life.
And that's okay.
And also I put a lot of stock into other people caring too before. So it was like, I would spend all this time explaining like minute by minute what I was up to on the weekend. And then I would ask them and they'd be like, it was fine. And I'd be like, but give me detail. Like, I want to hear about your weekend. And they didn't want to tell me about their weekend. And like, I would be like, why? Like, are you not, like, I would spend Sunday night practicing how I was going to tell people, like, in my head. But like, again, I have so many thoughts going on all the time that like part of my Sunday ritual was sitting there going, oh, this weekend I went to this person's house, and then I went here, and then I did this thing, and then I did that. And oh my gosh, you'll never believe what happened when we went to this thing. And like, wow. I had all these like, again, I thought they were just fun stories that people couldn't wait to hear. And I put all this pressure on myself to be this entertainer. And then at the end of the day, I'd have nothing left for myself, for my partner, for other people. And also I would get mad at like customer service reps because I had been running myself ragged all day, trying to be this like really like sparkle of a person, I guess.
Okay, so I'm going to thank you again. And I had a feeling that's what your answer was going to be, but to demonstrate that you're still on the journey, but to acknowledge how far you've come on the journey, because I think that has to do with self-care, self-awareness, and self-love. So the fact that now you don't worry as much, you're not perfect because you're still on the journey, but you don't worry as much about what people think of you because you're more aware of yourself. You're more aware of the room, when people like read the room, you're more aware of the room, you're more aware of other people, and you're more aware of energy. And that is a massive amount of deep work. Right. So I'm just going to acknowledge it. And again, thank you, because I think people that are listening, it will be very helpful for them to hear today's podcast, because I think we all on some level struggle with it at different levels. And you've demonstrated one end of the spectrum, and now maybe you're in like the middle of the spectrum on caring about what people think. But what has happened is your confidence has built and your self-awareness is built, and you've been able to relieve that worry about what people think, or I have to be this label for people to like me. I have to be the funny person in the office for people to like me. So I need to continue to be that. So thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah. Thank you.
And thank you, listeners, if you're still with us.
That's the beauty of a podcast. They can pause and keep listening later or whatever.
That's true.
So shall we do our 3 breaths for letting go to end off?
Yes, let's.
Okay, everybody. If you are somewhere safe, please join Shadoe and I. By safe, I mean not driving, somewhere where you can actually close your eyes and take a breath. Come on to the edge of your chair. Place your feet on the ground. Maybe put your hand on your heart if you want to. And know that the ground and gravity and the earth and the planet is always supporting you, always underneath you, always there for you. And I just want you to take a big breath and say to yourself, I release pressure and expectations. On this next breath, say to yourself, I relieve my regrets. My past does not define me. And on this last one, I am excited to move forward. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Thank you, Miss Shadow, for, I think, one of our best relieving sessions. Really, I feel like I feel good. Like I actually feel like my shoulders. I feel like there's a weight off my shoulders, and that's part of this experiment, right? I feel better in my body. I feel better to actually have talked about something that I've literally never talked about. So. Thank you for being on this experiment with me in this podcast.
Yeah. And thank you for trusting me and sharing with me.
Yeah. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you next time. Okay, bye.
This episode of Let's Relieve Regret was produced by Shadoe Ball and Victoria Muir-Bercia.
Editing by me, Victoria Muir-Bercia.
We are an independent podcast supported by you, our listeners.
If you think this podcast sends a valuable message, you had an aha moment, or learned something new about yourself, help us realize our goal of reaching as many listeners as possible.
We encourage you to take action and support us right now by choosing one of the following options.
You can easily support us by
following us on Instagram at relieve.regret.
Tell 2 friends.
Leave a 5-star review on whatever app you're listening to us on.
Leave a tip at coffee.com/Let's Relieve Regret podcast. That's ko-fi.com/Let's Relieve Regret podcast.
Join our conversations in the Facebook group, Let's Relieve Regret Podcast.
Find all this information, all the links, and more in the podcast notes. Okay, bye.
Bye.